Just first thing I'm going to do as we go through, just take a note of all the specs on these, so I've got a bit of a picture of what the set is, and then that can reveal certain things as we go through. It can help it can reveal things before you even hit a shot, but it can also help just make sense of what we see in the bay as well. So a lot of it's looking at, today in particular, from a fitting point of view, is looking at from a functional point of view, how do you swing and do the clubs actually complement what you're doing physically?
Yep.
So a lot of it is sort of levers and sort of timing.
Yep.
So there's a lot of talk about flex and kick points and bend profiles and things, but actually if you can't physically control the club head timing wise, then it doesn't leave a lot else.
No.
Naturally right-handed?
Yes. Yeah.
Any injuries at all that we need to be aware of?
No. All good.
General mental scarring
Yeah,
from playing the game?
Yes. Emotional scarring. So,
Have you played from a young age?
No, I'm a hockey player.
Okay, yeah.
So you'll see the old short back swing and...
Does that mean, like me, you started playing on grass?
Exactly, yes. Yeah, I played for Woking.
Okay, yeah. What position were you?
Left
migrate
wing.
Backwards over the years?
Yeah, left wing, up, midfield. I was always, sort of fairly healthy.
Attack-based,
yeah. I could run around those days.
So I played golf before hockey. So I sort of started, having been at London sort of prep school, went up to Cambridge for secondary school, and it was hockey rather than football. So went into the C team, and then they worked out I could hit hard and accurately. Right. And I worked out on grass, if you chip it a bit, it ran better.
Yes.
So I then became basically left back who could get in the way and hit it hard.
Okay.
Very little skill set apart from ball striking.
I was always good at, I was fairly good at, because I was low to the ground, I was always good at sort of wobbling with the ball. Yeah. So I was, and I was quite quick.
Right, yeah.
So, so that's...
So generally we're focusing on irons in particular today, is there anything specifically that you are kind of seeing performance-wise or have noticed, or is it more a case of saying, well, this is what I've got and
trying to come with, I've really trying to come with an open mind, Simon. I bought those. The Apexes have been absolutely beautiful. I absolutely love them, I must admit. And I've been, I suppose, I'm a bit of a soft spot for Callaway, but that is what it is. I mean, I didn't really necessarily have those fitted.
Yeah.
I just went along and they worked for me. I got them just before I joined Hindhead.
As you can say, they're probably kind of 2015-ish, 14-15.
Yeah, they were.
Because these are the first.
They were the
first of the Apexes.
Yes.
Yeah, and the Apex is a model that's been brilliant over the years. It's something that they've refined and developed rather than they found a formula that. Yeah. Excuse me, the forged frame, the Marost face, faster face.
Yeah.
They just found a great formula for it. So there hasn't been a necessity to make wholesale changes. They've kind of done what Ping and Titleist and Mizuno to a point have done over the years, and they said, look, this product works. So what's the point in messing around with something that works? And I remember when these launched, chatting to our Mizuno rep, going, well, your MX series is going to take a hit on the back of this, they've been very impressive ever since. So it's no surprise that you've enjoyed using them. Okay. I think Stenson must have bought up all the last sets of the Legacy Blacks over the years because he's still using them.
Oh, is he?
Yeah, and a couple of our guys used to work at Callaway, and they said, I don't know where he's got those from, because they were limited such a long time ago.
Yeah.
Like some of the pros over the years have bought up last models off eBay just to have stock should something go wrong. So yeah. But no, great model over the years.
No, and I tell you, they've hugely helped, and I'm probably going to be sad to see them go. But
hopefully we can find some performance that makes you kind of look back with pleasure, but be grateful for a change.
And why didn't I change them before? Yeah. Yeah.
And anything from a swing point of view that you're currently working on, or go back to as a swing thought?
No, I'm generally just get up and hit it.
Yeah.
So yeah.
And generally, would you say you more, I guess from that, would you play a fairly stock shot each time, or would you play, or just play a shot that's in the shot that's in front of you? In terms of, would you manoeuvre the ball and shape it, or would you kind of say, right, this is my shot, and I'll just?
I generally, I'm a bit of a feel player.
Yeah.
So if I see the shot and then I don't think. I mean, yeah, I think I'm quite good at adapting. I probably don't have the best swing in the world, but it works.
I'm sure you can't shot. It would take an awful lot to surprise us in these bays.
Yeah.
It's not doable, but it's.
So
how often do you get to play, on average?
It would be. I would hope to play 3 times a week.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. So I have a very, I would say, generous handicap at the moment. I'm struggling to play to it, but it's it is what it is. So golf is a journey.
Yeah, and I think the current handicap system has definitely led to a little bit more fluctuation with it.
Yeah.
I know one chap who he had went up to play I think it was the RNA sort of autumn medal kind of thing, and had 2 good rounds, but within those had a couple of horrific holes.
Yes.
So actually his gross score adjusted became very strong.
Yes.
And he went from something like 7 to 3 that weekend because it was quite early and he hadn't got many rounds in.
Yeah.
And of course we all found that hilarious because he was a 6-7 handicapper, not a 3.
Yes.
But
yeah. So no, I just love it. I think it's a fantastic game. It's I've met loads of really nice people through it. You go to some fantastic pieces of land.
That's the thing. I agree. I always say to people, I think with golf we have we have a sport where we can. It's multitasking where we get to go and play all these different terrains and course types. We can play the courses that the pros play. Like it's very, very hard to get on centre court, for example, whereas you can go and play the old course, or you can go and play most of the the major venues. And everything's different. Every day is different from a condition point of view. Every course is different. Whereas, other sports, the dimensions of the pitch are the same every time.
Yeah.
So
no, absolutely.
It's just whether someone who's that much better can make you irrelevant.
Yeah. No, absolutely.
And the variety of people that we get to meet and spend time with, and it's great from that point of view. Okay. So what all this does is lets me kind of say, right, we can see from the components that you've got, for example, in the irons where the shaft weights are, they're in 95 gram, swing rate of D3 is relatively strong, so they swing fairly, not heavy, but kind of the weights in the club head end. Okay. So mid to lightweight steel shaft, so steel goes from roughly 80 grams to 130, 135, and they're at 95, so in the lighter mid end. But then from a balance, so the swing weight's a bit of a needs a bit of interpreting. It's not an absolute scale, so it's kind of a scale of amount of proportionate balance of the club. But because it's around a fixed fulcrum, it doesn't take into account the length, the weight, the components. So for that shaft weight at what then was standard length, which is now a quarter inch shorter than current standard, to be a E3 swing weight's relatively bottom end heavy. But then into the wedges, you're going from a 95-100 gram shaft in your short irons to a 130 gram shaft in the wedges. So there's a really big jump up in dead weight of the shaft. So certainly kind of transition between pitch wedge and 50 degree. I'd expect there to be quite a difference in the way they swing. So the static balance, the swing weight stays basically the same.
Wow.
But in the 50 degree, all the weight's in the shaft, rather than in pitch wedge, the weight's in the head. So you will hit one of them noticeably better and more consistently than the other.
Oh, wow.
And have more control over one than the other.
Yeah, that's...
which one I don't know yet, not seen you swing, but it's certainly for fuller shots. I would expect the 50 to be relatively hard work. And better on the knockdown shots and the quieter ones, whereas the pitch wedge you can kind of free through it and you can get a little bit more speed and a bit more pop from. And that's purely just the physics of the weight of it.
Okay.
So I guess most of the time you'd go a bit heavier in wedges where there's less natural acceleration and swing, so we don't need the club to come with us so much, and you're using a bit more weight to drop into the back of the ball. So standard, most wedge shafts are on the heavier side because it's sort of safer from an industry point of view.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
But they're often, the dynamic gold shaft at 130 grams is right up the top of the weight scale.
Yeah.
So,
Again, I just fancy some wedges and.
Yeah, but I'm very good heads. The Vokies, yeah, very good.
The Vokies were, calling my name, and so.
It's something that pretty much all. There are more now that are using sort of about a 115 gram shaft. I think because, again, over the years there has been a trend, just because really it suits people, to go a little bit lighter. So if you're in a kind of a 90-100 gram iron shaft, that's sort of 110, 115. If we're kind of blanket broad speaking, about a 10%, 10% up in shaft weight is normally roughly where you go. So they have brought, Callaway use a 115 gram dynamic gold shaft. Titleist still use the same one, but there are a number of them that are dropping that shaft weight down a little bit as standard, purely because more and more players are playing lighter. So, but that's where there's certainly a separation within the iron set. At the top end, I guess comparing at the top end, the base weight through your woods is actually kind of proportionally fairly in line with the iron shafts actually. So it's more the wedges that stand out as being a little bit heavier. But other than that, there's nothing untoward in there, which is always a good start. So, loft and lies, there's a bit of movement there with the forged frame. There's a little bit of movement over time and usage, but there's nothing. So the lies have got almost proportionally slightly more upright, depending which way you look at it, slightly more upright in the long irons or flatter in the short irons, depending on what's correct. But so they've just moved. They'll just move with usage. But actually, lofts have stayed pretty consistent. So they're really consistent. So you clearly don't abuse them much.
No.
So what we'll do is, with nothing kind of majorly stand out there, I think what we'll do is grab any club you like and have a loosen.
Yep.
And then we'll take it all from there.
That's it right here.
Grab that slightly to the side. That's what I used to see. There was a chap who's a pro who had a practice glove that literally was like a dead spider. It was used so much it was formed into a hand shape, and it only moved when your hand went into it.
And it crackles, when you.
I think it had gone beyond that stage.
I should have done.
So have some swings and we'll loosen up there. Which club is that one?
This is pitching wedge.
So only because of the pitch of flight, we'll just on pitch wedge unless we just go off the front mat.
Okay.
Just because of the.
I just tend to warm up with this one to start with.
That's perfect. Yeah. So have you always been fairly local to this part of the world?
I've grew up in Woking, so that was a nice place to be.
Yeah. I mean, golf-wise, it's such a fortunate part of the world to be in. Pop a little bit, it's a bit lighter than before you want to loosen up. Don't worry too much about where it shows the direction off that front mat based on where the trackman's currently lined up. So it's lined up for when you come back off the main strike mat. Whereabouts did you hear about us originally?
Say again?
Where did you hear about us originally?
The guys at the club, and then I did the Surrey Chamber of Commerce.
Okay,
And then I think you came to Tandridge.
Yes. God, scoring there, my goodness. that will live with me forever. That winning score. That was quite. I mean, I know off what we were playing. There was no chance, but you did look at it and go, my God.
Yeah, I know. Yeah.
Isn't the first time I played it? It was an interesting course actually. There was some really spectacular holes.
Yeah, I know.
Oh, that one just because don't if you're on the right side, it'll show you the shot just because of where the TrackMan sort of channel is looking down. But no, it was a fun course to play.
Yeah, no, it was. Well, they're trying to actually spend a bit more money on it, aren't they?
Mm.
Off the toe. Yep, felt that one.
Out of interest, so what hockey stick did you use primarily?
It was old. It would have been, as in length, or
so for example, like when I stopped using
it wouldn't have
DFE
been
black and things like that. Just from a kind of weighting point of view.
Oh, which one did you have?
I had the DFE black. A lot of guys had the green or the blue, which are a little bit lighter. The black was the unsubtle thing with the weight at the bottom end. It was very much a defender's stick. Partly because it's quite interesting, depending on. So was your game mainly around kind of the finer skills and okay, yeah, because that actually functionally the reason why certain sticks work like cricket bats is that the weight's in a certain place. So how you manoeuvre yourself and how your musculature works.
Yeah, I'll have a think.
It does feed into the golf club side of things as well. They've done any work on Hinder at all? Any changes recently? I know they've obviously redone a good few years back the 8th par 3.
Yes, so that was the last.
Yeah.
We've been beautifying the course.
Right.
So doing the paths.
Okay. Yeah.
Which has made it really, makes it look really, really nice. So.
Tend to take much divot or tend to pick it off the top a bit
I
more?
tend to pick it off. Okay. Again, no, that's right. Yep, felt that one.
And general kind of shot, would you play for a particular shot shape as a sort of a standard shot or pretty neutral?
I'm pretty neutral, I think. Yeah, I mean, I tend to draw, I don't know, I tend to get a bit handsy.
Okay, yeah.
With my irons, but that's just poor.
I think you can feed a chunk of that back to some of the hockey about keeping it down and that's the thing from a hockey point of view. It's changed so much now. It's predominantly a slap hit rather than a hit.
Yeah. I mean, in my day that we were hitting it, my youngest plays and it's all
Yeah.
And it's completely different.
Yeah, different game now.
I went to watch him and he's just it's ridiculous. They don't hit it anymore.
No, it's either that kind of flat slap like that or it's That's such a fast game.
Yeah,
such a fast game.
I mean, I wouldn't survive now.
That's why they got rolling subs now. No one can do more than 10 minutes at a time. Yeah, gone are the days of that sedate game where you could stroll around for a few minutes whilst the player was up the other end. Yeah.
Right.
So as and when you feel suitably limber, we'll go to a 6 if you want to build up to.
Let's. I feel that was nice. That was. I'm trying not to rush, and I'm trying not to be.
What ball do you play?
I have a tailor-made.
Okay, yeah, the TB5.
Yeah.
Standard 5.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, I'll pop those down. I'll grab some of those. What I'll do is I'll just make sure I need to put the Preview ones I don't need. These I'll just make sure they've got the markings on them to measure the spin. Grab those dots. So, what do you do work-wise?
I'm a director of a South African mining company.
Okay.
We're an office in Farnham. So we bring a product up from South Africa called vermiculite. which goes into fireproofing and what else? Hydroponics, seeds, but majority of the market is in construction, so plasterboards.
Right. Okay.
So all if you wanted to make a building more fire retardant, so so we sell about 80,000 tons of that per year.
It's one of those things that's hard to comprehend how much
it's a big pile.
is.
But interestingly, for an industrial mineral, it's actually quite a small market. You're talking.
Is that because from a weight / of density point of view, is that because of a smaller volume or just a smaller weight of it?
Yes, bit of both. Of both. Right.
Great stuff. So we'll get we'll get kind of. Oh yeah. Actually, we don't need. Now we're back on that, Matt. We don't need those. That was more for the.
So just hit a few.
Yeah, we'll get kind of half a dozen shots. Get a good kind of benchmark. What would you play if there's a par 3 on a decent number for this? I would say when it's not hot in summer, but we haven't really.
Yeah.
What would be kind of a base number if there's a par 3 on a good distance for the 6?
I would 150.
Okay. Yeah. Great.
I think that's about. Yeah, I wouldn't probably. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. 3 yards short, 147 carat.
There we go.
It's when someone says a distance, and I'm standing going, right, that sounded perfectly reasonable, but then occasionally you get someone going, a 185, and you're looking going, how am I going to explain that the distance isn't as far as that? Very realistic. Yeah.
I was explaining to my youngest, I said, all you need to do, go down the range, find out what each club, how far it goes, right? And then golf becomes quite easy.
well, part of it does, yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's one of the things where not that many people really know their distances.
But
they
don't
go off
spend,
there summer, downwind, downhill.
And they don't spend enough time, finding out, and I've spent quite a lot of time measuring, you know, otherwise. It doesn't always go.
And from a directional point of view, would a bit of a pull left be a more likely miss? Or?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. And definitely.
Okay.
That is.
More sort of straight pull rather than turning over. Yeah.
Ah.
Let's get a couple more. Let's pull.
That was a bit of ground on that one.
And slightly heavy be the missed strike, if anything.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. I've got 2 dots on that one. That actually ties in. I'll explain once we've hit a couple more shots, but that ties in with the balance setup as well. That does make sense.
Okay.
So.
Yeah, definitely a heavier contact would be. Oh.
Just one more would be great. Thank you, yeah. Okay. Yeah, so the reason I say the slightly heavier contact makes sense because where the balance is in the bottom end, so you've got quite a sharp, what we call a sharp tempo, so it's not a sort of long, languid pull on it, it's turn. And so that quicker change of direction means that if the club gets out of sync, then, and particularly where these are a bit more bottom end heavy, it gets that happening a little bit more.
Yeah.
So it then means getting a little late, dropping in and catching the ground, and then, or you've got to come out of it to get it there.
Bit of hockey.
Which bring, From that side of things, no. Possibly being kind of not letting the not being able to swing it up there, and so keeping that backswing a little bit shorter. So there's potentially a little bit of that. So that that'll contribute a little bit. But there's also, we've all got a kind of natural tempo that you're either a fast twitch musculature control base or power base. So you're naturally a little bit on that faster side. It's not like it's a it's sort of more the equivalent of Nick Price versus Ernie Els. You've either got that upbeat tempo, and that's just the way your body works. Not so. Where if the club gets heavy, then you're playing chase and having to play catch up with the bottom end a little bit. And I think that's where, for me, that bit of a pull miss, because you've got to get the club through, stand up a little bit, and that catapults it left. But that also, from a club that's a little bit behind you, makes that more likely. And then the reaction to that would be the one right. But what we can see, that first one, timing-wise, and was the strongest swing, actually. Now, it's whether by half a mile an hour, but that's then got the best result. So what
the first one did feel good.
That when you're on, I mean, they're not wildly far off, but they're definitely, the bottom end's a little bit detached. And that's where I think, from a consistency point of view, what I would expect you to find on course is that the good ones are very, very good, and would incline you to go, well, it must be me. But the drop-off in performance, certainly in contact, that we can see here, the ball speed, is you're going from 94, 97 miles an hour to 102. Now, actually, for a very consistent delivery, half a degree tolerance on angle of attack, 1 degree on path. But the face angle gets a little bit, the face to path numbers get a little bit more variable. So that's the bit that tells me that you're having to firefight the bottom end a little bit. And efficiency from 135 to 145. So when you get it, the drop off in the efficiency isn't quite as much as one might expect. I think because you're that bit shallower and going through, it doesn't kill quite as much speed. So it kind of skids. You might get punished a little bit more on turf than mat. It'll kind of bounce through a little bit more from that.
Yeah, that's fair. It's fairly consistent, though. That's nice.
Absolutely, absolutely. In golfers, we all are more consistent than we think. It's just that because from the shot distance, the effects are amplified that much that it can be easy to think that we're not. But say delivery pattern, very, very consistent. So for me, it's a case of, I think, if we can get a little bit of balance away from the club head and allow you just to rotate and collect, that stops your hands having to do quite as much to deliver the club head. We should be able to tighten up the strike a little bit, and just mean that the actual, I'll do it on that dispersion pattern, I'll put it on whether it's carry or total, that we can tighten that up a little bit, lose the real misses, should pretty much go. But also the one that lasso's left should also be reduced quite a bit as well. So, and move everything just generally up a little bit more towards that top one a bit more regularly. So
these dropped, so this was the first one, wasn't it?
And then, which is absolutely spot on. Spot on where you said it was. But if you get a little bit off on timing, they just punish you a little bit too much. But I don't think it's necessarily total weight being a million miles off, just where the weight is.
That's good to know.
And then potentially the only other bit, being somebody who's more of a picker, you're putting less kind of friction and rip on the back, so you're never going to be a high spin player. If we can keep that spin in the mid fours, then that's just going to come down a little bit steeper, give you a little bit more important when it's. I think we peed it down the last few days. But when it's summertime and the ground's firmer, just give that a little bit more control when it comes in. A little bit more bite on the green. But predominantly, if we can, I think just timing-wise, that'll come through getting that little bit of a cleaner hit. And there are some heads that will retain just a little bit more spin than others. But getting that dispersion tightened up a touch so that your kind of okay shot is a little bit closer to a good one. So what I'll do first up, I want to keep base weight pretty similar, but I'm going to get even out the balance through, and this is where the kind of the hockey stick question comes into. So I've always been, historically, I was always quite bottom end heavy. So I was a Gray Nichols Mega Drive cricket bat, where all the weight was in the toe. I was DFE Black, all the weight's in the bottom, and those are just sticks that worked, or cricket bats that worked for me. I now understand a bit more why functionally.
Yeah.
Unsubtle hoof, I think is the, or say unsubtle certainly is one of. So I get a head that's similar to the Callaway as a start point. Right. So what I don't want to do is I don't want to use a head that's going to supercharge something or massively change. I want to go fairly, I guess, inoffensive on the head first. So still keeping a little bit of face tech with the channel in the back, like the current ones. But I don't want a head that's going to knuckle spin off. So
no. I mean, I've never ever played golf with blades, or you know, and people say, well, you know, you've come down a bit now, and maybe have you ever thought of trying them? And I don't.
Yeah, blades is one of those things where to go from what you've got to blades would be very noticeable.
Yes.
So yes, you don't. Yeah, there's a strong argument to say you don't necessarily need. If I go on a heat map on strike, you know, your strike pattern is pretty consistent.
That's nice to see. Yep.
But to go from those to a blade, you can go. There's an argument to say, well, yes, a more blade style club will give you a bit more consistency on spin and on yardage, but you then lose quite a bit of margin of error off centre.
Okay. Yeah.
So
I want to make the game easy, not hard.
Yeah, and I think if you've been, it's one of those things. If you've been playing blades for a while, then you know, a blade-like club is no issue. If you've not played them before, then that one visually they're going to look tiny compared to those, and that can have quite a reaction in the back of the head here. But I think it starts to become quite noticeable that so the Apex or go further than that, things like the you know, the Rogue series or the more kind of game improvement style club heads are really geared towards reducing the drop back. A blade stops the one that goes, so it's as I won't go as far as it's not quite as much physical as mental, but the last thing you want to be stood over a ball thinking is, my goodness, I need to get this perfect. So yeah, you definitely don't need to play something that's game improvement. But we can refine it a little bit, but keep a bit of margin of error. Great. So starting with the T150s, this is one of Titleist's latest ones. So this is the update on the T100S.
Okay.
So I'm just waiting for this to load up.
Looks nice.
So it's not too. The previous model's a little bit thinner on the top line. Whereas they've got a little more club head to look at this time, but it's probably slightly shorter heel to toe than the Callaways, but not too small. So go on to something that's going to be noticeably a little less bottom end heavy. So there's no point making too subtle a change to start with.
Oh.
Okay, so what I can see there, I've lost too much club head there. So you're able just to whip it over. So okay, I'm going to change one parameter at a time. I'm going to weight the head up a little bit. So where we've gone,
that was horrible.
A shaft that's got a higher balance point. And we've dropped the swing weight, the static balance bit. I'm just going to pull the balance up a little bit more. So it's a case of whether, really it's working out whether do we need to move the weight within the shaft towards the handle or keep the balance in a similar place to those but just less head weight. Which is a suck and see kind of thing. You have to test them to know. Theory's great. It's got to work in practice. But shaft weight's still at the 95 gram mark.
Okay.
Okay, so giving you a bit more club head back straight away, that's a cleaner hit. Still a little at left, it's a cleaner hit, but ball speed starts to move up. So we're now at 103, which is up there with the best ones with your Callaways. Okay.
Still a bit left, isn't it?
Don't worry about that yet.
That's just me, isn't it?
We can work on that. Okay, yeah. So with that What I like with those two hits is that from a general kind of movement through, one, there's not that fetch with the hands that you've got to do to collect it, but by adding a bit of weight, you get the club dropping in. So you can really getting the weight and where the weight is to a point where you can use it to develop your speed and just keep going through the shot. So they've gone down, albeit slightly different strikes, but they've gone pretty much down the same line. So, okay, that's a good shot. I'll make a bit of a change. We'll come back to that for sure. So, but you can see a previous shot there. One, there's plenty of spin there. So head style has created a little bit more spin.
It felt nice.
But we're retaining a lot of efficiency and similar ball speed. So there's only 1 and a bit yards difference on carry. Now, actually, we could probably proportionally afford to strengthen that up a little bit. But we've straight out the gate with a head style change and the balance change, we've got 10% more spin without needing to send it into orbit, which is good. So that's a good change.
Yeah.
So I'll come back to that one.
Amazing. And Simon, and people say, why bother do all of this? What.
So ultimately, it's a case of, the way I'd always liken it to is if you wouldn't buy a pair of shoes 2 sizes too big and wear 5 pairs of socks.
No.
Because you're going to get blisters. And so essentially that's what fitting is trying to avoid. It's trying to get the clubs to work for you rather than you to have to find a way of making them work. And with the amount of options that there are now, we can find a solution for everyone that can make things work just more naturally.
Because every human being is different.
Yeah, and we're physiologically built differently, different heights, different swing planes, different movement patterns, and so you can, it's not just the best golfers out on the planet who get this done. It actually has more relevance. The higher someone's handicap, in principle, the lower their ability to adapt to the club. So better players can adapt to clubs and make them work and find a way, although you lose consistency with that. And as you go up the handicap scale, you want the clubs to mean that they don't have to find a way every time they play. So it mitigates the misses to a certain amount, and actually it gives the player, the club's ultimately a club that works well shows you what you're doing. So it actually allows you to develop the swing from a technique point of view more naturally as well. So sometimes you can make some really big changes if someone's got something horribly inappropriate. Yeah, but equally speaking, there's the case where someone's got something really quite suitable and it's a fine tune. But we just want people to enjoy their golf a bit more. Okay.
Ground.
Okay, so I changed back to a shaft where the weight's in the tip end, and what I can see as you come through, there's a little bit more of that chase again. So we'll get rid of that. So the more even balance is definitely better because you're able to swing the other one, stay in balance and posture, and just turn around it. So the moment we throw the weight out, it starts to change that pattern, and then you've got to adjust your.
That wasn't just me hitting the.
No, exactly. What we can see from a numbers point of view, there's one that went a little bit left, and then I added the weight, and then you've got a 1 degree variation in face to path, half a degree in path, 0 in angle attack once we weighted it up.
Yeah.
That one's got still about a degree in angle of attack, path very consistent, but you've got a 4 degree change in face angle. So the moment we go heavier in the bottom end, it brings in the one that gets late on you.
Okay.
That's the one that then brings in the need to flip it to square it, whereas that's just not there with a different balance point as well. So so that was quite noticeable, which is good. And the thing is, as golfers, we'd all go, "Oh, I must have been doing something differently."
Or did I just hit it badly? I don't know.
But because of the change that I knew I'd made, by changing that weight position, you're saying, right, a good result will do this, but a bad result will do that, and we saw the bad result straight away. So.
Cool. Okay.
Oh, that's got. That's right. Some have a slightly shorter hosel depth. just evening that weight off a little bit more again. Yeah, it's interesting. Whenever we even the weight off, the first one is a bit that way, but you can see it come through the ball a little more cleanly. There's not that almost last minute stall out and catch up. Okay. So I'll watch one more. Base weight on that is slightly heavier than the first one. And again, we've got a little bit more to the right-hand side, so I'll just watch one more.
Right.
Yeah, it's just getting then just into the ground a little bit, and
you
should feel it in terms of being able to finish and stay stable. There's just a little bit more.
That was the
balance goes off a little. Okay.
I like the first one. The first one felt nice.
We're going to go back to it. There are times where sometimes if the first one's just better than what you've got, it can feel really good.
Yeah.
And then you go back to it, it looks horrible. But I think this might. I always hesitate to open my mouth and comment.
No, go on.
But my gut feels I think this is going to be better again. This is back to the KBS Tour Light. And for you, it should just feel, if it's better, it should just feel simpler, a little easier just to rotate and collect it, and just a little bit less going on with the swing.
Off the bottom bit.
Not too bad. There's definitely not that change of balance at the end of the swing.
One more.
I'll watch one more. I might get a slight variation on that. Definitely where the weight is through the club is better. You're not having to manage it so much through the ball.
No.
I wonder, I'm going to get a slight change on that. It's close. It's definitely,
just caught the ground again.
Those it's the closest, but I wonder whether, I'm going to just change that up a little bit more. I think if we
That didn't feel very good, the last one.
Yeah, it's got a little bit, those last couple got a little bit more out to in, so it'll be interesting. We're going to get the same series of shaft, just a different flex with just a slightly different weight. See where that goes. So I've gone to, it's a few grams heavier, but same base shaft model, just to see, almost sort of going back to it, having hit it well before, whether actually just needing a bit more to hit against, because there's a sort of built-in bit of confidence in there.
Yes.
Just log that change here. Yeah, it's interesting. So, yes, weight fell forward a little bit there, but actually the going that bit heavier just knitted that together a bit more. So I think the first batch of swings were let's see what happens. The second batch were, I remember liking this. And then, while speeds might not change, there's often a little bit more on the swing, a little bit more commitment through it. Yeah, contact's better going back to a slightly...
Feels nice.
So same shaft, just a few grams heavier. There's a bit more to hit against. It's giving you a little more to time with. Okay.
Feels nice.
Yeah. I'll see. That one just got a calculation spins. I think, if anything, this head's maybe just giving a little bit more flight. So we're losing a bit of yardage because I think it's just popping it up slightly.
Yeah.
So I'm going to, again, shot pattern, one's a little bit different to the other, but actually face to path is less than half a degree difference. So I'll get, so if that's that one, I'm just sort of thinking through something. That's definitely not going to work because I've got a lighter one as well, just in case. And this belt and braces, just do one other one to compare with, but
should I be worried about length? I mean,
so a little bit of that is those had a bit more fade on.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that'll be, you know, ultimately some of those sort of formulas there. That's still good. If we take the first batch, that was with some of those were slightly stronger hit, slightly stronger speed.
Yeah.
So those are the ones that were hit really well.
Yeah.
And I think those ones have got the face just got a little bit more open, so that's going to drop a few yards off.
Yeah.
Where we have changed, take the averages there, 20 launch, 4,500 spin, with your original ones were 19-bit launch and 10% less spin. So the lower spin would always hit it slightly further.
Okay. Yeah.
So take those first ones, it was 3.9 on spin. So if we can maintain the ball speeds where that first one was,
Yeah.
but I'll go back to the first one with the lighter one, or those ones where, that kind of combination.
Yeah.
We're maintaining the carry, but just getting a bit more control at the other end. That's ideally where I'd like to get to.
Okay.
So I'll just make this. I'll definitely come back to that.
Could I grab a glass of water?
Of course, yeah. Let me grab that for you.
Thanks, Simon.
Yeah.
Thanks, Simon. Thank you.
No problem at all. Yeah, some of that distance we can get back with a slight change in head style. This is there's a bit of speed off it. We can get a bit more pop out of some of the other heads.
I've always, all my mates pull my leg about it that I'm not long, but generally quite accurate.
Tends to work. I think that was.
So I don't want to chase distance. I just want to be. It's as I say, I feel I'm very good from say 150 down into the green. I'm quite like that distance, and that's what
Well, the last major showed the value of being in play, didn't it? And I think that for me is a lesson that a lot of amateur golfers can heed. Is that there's so much time they watch Rory or Rahm or Scheffler hitting it 350 yards. It's like, oh, that would be great, but actually forget that they're also, most of the time they're in play. But the Open showed where if you're a bunkerser or if you're finding trouble, which is a penalty, there's no use.
No.
And so I thought that was, we'll see how many golfers actually learned from it, but he just took, I guess he couldn't reach some of the trouble.
Yes.
So so that helped a certain amount, but it's still, I think the way of, I think there's so much stats around, hit driver, get it close to the green.
Yeah.
But actually, if that just puts you at a length which puts you in trouble, I think for most golfers, being in play is worth far more than being 10 yards further up. If your technique allows you to be 10 yards further up and in play, great. But it's a bit easier from the fairway than the trees, or heather in your case.
Skinny, that one.
Okay. Yeah, just dropped a little bit of ball speed. Nice line through, which dropped a little bit of ball speed. Yeah, a little lower on the face. Okay.
No.
Yeah, it's not better than that KBS shaft. I think the KBS is the better one of them. So I'm going to get a bit of a change in head to see if we can just get a little bit more speed off of it. Okay, right. Get that out of the way. Yeah, so essentially it's the same model as the first shaft we went to, but just the slightly firmer flex, which is a few grams heavier. It's the weight that really then, that helped just to knit the strike together again. A couple of different models and see just where the spin goes with a couple of them in particular. So I'll start with. So these are all, whilst the T150 has a little bit of face tech, it's designed to give a little bit of speed. It's not, there are others that will give a bit more. Now if it can keep some of the height and not drop much spin, great. I don't really want the spin just to knuckle off. So
yeah.
Let's check the loft and the lie. Done well to keep your knees and ankles intact with hockey.
Yes. Yeah. So a lot of friends, because we played on the the first pitches that were basically concrete with carpet on top.
Yeah.
They were, we trained on them, and
right, yeah.
It was just.
I remember a couple of those, but I remember one Marham pitch that I played on. That was horrific.
Yeah. And then we had I remember playing at Basingstoke with they had one of the first water-based pitches.
Okay.
And that was, and the ball was.
Right, yeah, because they now, we know a couple of guys who are GB hockey, and they're saying now that they're reducing the amount of being responsible, because they used to just apply so much water you could slide around on them and do whatever, but they were great to play on because the ball rewarded good ball striking, whereas now you can whack them into the pitch and they'd still just run. But yeah, I think it's about a third or a half of the water they used to use. Okay. Okay, interesting. That's popped it up a little bit more.
Oh.
Okay, that's done the opposite. That's actually kicked it up a little bit more.
Wow.
So
it's a bit different.
We'll change that one up. It's actually kicked it up a little higher than I expected it to. So it's, we don't need to hit it any higher than that last one. So
It felt nice.
Yeah, well, that's a Strixon ZX5, well-made head, but actually gave a little bit more launch and spin than. So they normally, and this is very normal in golf. It just could flare that up a little bit more. So you could argue on the one hand that spin's good, but relative to what you're where you're used to ball flight being and the way of playing, if we change it that much, then it's just going to take distance off.
Yeah.
That one will go for me, but that was better in terms of contact point, much better.
Wait, that. So switching to one of the JPX model Mizunos. So keeping a little bit of face tech, but this should be the operative word. Should just bring the flight down a little bit from where that was.
It's just to get it to swing it.
Okay.
And am I swinging it the same? How much?
Very similar. Very similar.
How much is this? Is this me? I mean,
Well, if we look at the average numbers across all of those, your path deviates by half a degree.
Okay.
So 5.9, 6, 6, 5, 4.7 we won them earlier. So generally around the 5, 5.5. So slightly out to win.
Yeah.
And faced with that one, a little bit more open on the face there. But the pattern of swing's really very similar. Clubhead speed, mile an hour.
Okay.
So pretty.
Okay, so I'm pretty
repeating.
consistent.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, a bit more ball speed straight out the gate there. Okay, that one actually got a calculation on spin, so I'll kind of hold reserve judgment on that. But immediately out of that, launch angle's back down a little bit, but the ball speed's kicked up a couple of miles an hour. Yeah, it's a more consistent contact straight away. Okay, that's more in line with closer to the flight we saw with the first couple of swings of the first option. I might watch a couple more of that. So, may or may not make any difference whatsoever. Visually, that head's a little bit neater, shape-wise. Is that good, bad, indifferent?
No, it looks...
Yeah. Not something that's going to make or break?
No.
Yeah.
Ah, didn't like that one.
Okay, not a bad, from a miss point of view, from a numbers standpoint, didn't drop off much in terms of performance, which is good.
That's better.
Right. That's it. Okay, so
That's better.
probably not, well, and those two very similar in terms of numbers. Okay, let's see if I go, I might just put the current version of what you have on, just to see.
After all that, I'm going to buy the same club.
But we don't know it, maybe, definitely maybe. Yeah.
Brilliant.
I mean, one thing actually that has developed over a bit of time is that sole shape, there's a little bit more bounce on them, which that might not be great.
You shouldn't have told me, because psychologically now I'm going to go, oh, this is the club.
Yeah. But it is an important bit.
Yeah,
It's the measurable bit, but if there's there can be a sort of a bit of an inbuilt confidence with something that, you know, we see it, whether it's brand, whether it's
and
model.
how much of golf is all about confidence?
50%.
Yeah. It's a big part.
It's you know, what you don't want is you don't want someone thinking about the club head stood over the ball.
No.
Okay. There we go. So back to a little, probably maybe even slightly thicker top line.
Yeah.
Than your current ones, but yeah, we'll see where this goes.
Bit low. Bit low. Oh, that felt nice.
Okay, so a little bit more launch out of that one, so we could bring the loft down a touch.
That one felt really nice.
That's picked the flight up a little bit more. So there's a lot of, I mean, what you gain potentially over those two heads out of a head like the Apex or the progression on the Apex that you currently got, there's a little bit more forgiveness to it. So there is a bit more, it might feel a little bit more stable across the face. So I'm going to I'll leave those there for the moment. It'll be interesting. We'll see a couple more of that anyway, but I'm going to get two other heads to compare with. Do I want to?
Yeah, again, you can see how it's shaping around nicely. Yeah. Really good snapback on that. So you can see really efficient on that as well.
I may or may not use that one, but I'll watch a couple more with that. Let's check. Yeah. What's interesting with that? It sounds nice. Funny, it sounds a little bit softer than some of the other.
It does.
Heads. What's interesting, the drop off in ball speed is slightly more. Let's go see where the. Okay, it was a little out of the toe. That was a little out of the toe. That one.
Yeah, that was. Yeah.
That was nice. Could hear it in the hit. That was good.
It's so funny, isn't it? That felt good as well.
Yeah, and that's back up. Okay. I'm going to, then the T200 is actually one I think that's worth.
That's it then. Full set of Callaways. Thank you and good night.
Control, repeat. See whether this has any positive effects on it. But certainly, if we were looking at that versus, say, one of the other heads, if you were looking to have something that just, if I've got to make this make sense in here. But yeah, I think, yeah, depending on what sort of angle you came from, if you, as you said earlier, what's the point of making it harder than it needs to be, then that's the angle where something like the Apex, or potentially this, if it performed well, has an advantage, because it gives you a little bit more margin of error than the other heads. There are players that go, actually, I don't feel like I get much feedback out of them. I'd like something that looks a little neater, or and then potentially you could find an angle, because there's not a huge difference in performance between the two, and sometimes again, you're saying that mental shift of having something that's a bit more blade-like, or so Monty's always said, why make it harder than it needs to be, and then you get players who almost respond better to a smaller, neater head shape.
So these, it's sort of. Are they better numbers? What do I mean by that?
Well, better. We've certainly got that little bit more spin, so that gives us the option to have that little bit more spin, and potentially give up a couple of yards, or strengthen it up and have the flight where you're used to seeing it. And so in an ideal world, we'll get just that little bit more. If we can get that little bit more speed on average, and that little bit more spin, then you're getting a bit of best of both worlds, where the average distance is going to stay basically the same, but you're getting a bit more, or carry distance, but you're getting a bit more control. But it's not like your current ball flight's horrendous. So at worst, if we've got the option of going one way or the other, then great.
No.
Okay. Hot from a speed point of view, but just actually that was just a slightly stronger swing actually as well, but just turn the toe over a little bit. I'll just watch one more of that, and I might put the Callaway back on.
That's where you almost swung around too far and you lost control of your swing.
No.
Yeah, it's not getting into the back of the ball as well. Okay, yeah. Just the contact wise.
That wasn't the best two
shots.
shots,
Clean.
but
You put the Callaway head back on. Actually, what would probably be a good thing to do, or sort of normalise, just go back and just see a few swings back with it. So essentially, it is very much a fine tune.
Yeah.
It's we're looking at same sort of shaft, base shaft weight, same sort of head style, lofts in an appropriate place. It's a slight redistribution of weight through the club that means not having to work the bottom end quite as much to find contact, which in principle means allowing your hands and arms to free up and just collect it on the way through.
Actually, so where you know if that 6 line you're going on your toe, that one there, that time.
Yeah, so what's interesting going back to it is that we can see where, obviously the base weight's the same, but we can see it's not like, if there was a change in total weight, your kind of synchronization with the handle end would change. You'd see they get out of sync. So that stays in sync, but we're seeing them leave the face a bit more open.
I don't know, is that just...
Contact solid.
Yeah, maybe it's because I've been...
It's because you've got out of the habit of having to fetch. So with those, to bring it back to target, you've got to close the face on it. So those last two are very consistent, but they're kind of starting on line and bleeding away.
Yeah, I'm going to...
But some of that is where you've not had to work the bottom end as hard on these.
Yeah. Oh, I see what you're
That
saying.
timing's bedded in a little bit.
Okay.
And going back to them, it's now that fetch that was in there isn't there.
Because those are making me not fetch it.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Interesting. Very interesting. No.
So the club head is just a little bit later to come through than
That was off the bottom.
with these ones. So I'll give you one more with that and we'll switch it back over.
Slow down, slow down.
Where is?
Let's just slow down a bit then.
So that's where we also have to wait for it and then let it catapult through. Whereas going back to this, you might pull the first couple, but then it means these can just chill out and just free it up.
Yeah.
And the club face should come through a little bit more easily. And in essence, that's pretty much the difference, is that we're not really fundamentally changing or looking to change very much about it. It's just a slightly more even weight distribution that allows you to just be a little bit more in control of the club face.
No. Oh,
that's got a funky swing. That was not 6 degrees up and 11 out to in. I'm just going to
can we delete that one?
ignore that one because that's a slightly weird set of numbers.
Bit of ground, it's better.
It's got a little bit of mat to that.
Slightly more forgiving head. You won't be saying full speed off the stealth, maybe a fraction faster, but what I'm looking for is a consistency factor of it as well.
Oh, that was nice.
Yeah, so just it's a noticeable when it's so that then
nice.
The face to path is starting to square, so you're able to get the toe coming through without having to really fetch the toe over.
Yeah, that was nice.
It is a fine tune.
Yeah.
Certainly not more than, and I think it's almost where we're probably on your very best shots with that might be slightly longer because you've got to work a bit harder with them to get it through. So when you time it, they might go off a few yards further.
Yeah.
That one allow you to, in principle, should allow you to generate a bit more speed and free it up. But because you haven't got to work quite as hard, so this sort of principle of go lighter, you get more speed, doesn't always track because if you've got more weight there, you've got to work and put more effort in to get it through. So sometimes heavier actually creates a little bit more speed. But ultimately it means just less of a tendency for that club head to get a little behind you, a little late, and then have to do that to square it.
Okay.
So the left-right, so effectively the long left, short right dispersion should tighten in a little bit. But we're not fundamentally seeing vast differences because they're, broadly speaking, in a very good place.
Okay.
Well,
that's nice to know.
There's a bit of refresh, and there's a slight shift we can do in the weight positioning that means just a little less complication with what the hands have to do. So kind of probably realistically top end of the set, 5-6 on is where you'll like to see the biggest improvement because it's not quite as much finding contact. Shorter runs where there's a bit less acceleration, that separation is a bit less, therefore contact and straighter shots is a little bit easier to achieve. So as you go from pitch 9 to 8 to 7 to 6 to 5, proportionally a little bit more differential the higher up the set you go, but just takes out a little bit of compensating. But that's about it.
Okay.
The heads you've got, because they've got the face tech, work well, they're giving you good ball speed. Those heads are an update on it, are working well, giving you good ball speed. There's a little bit more interesting, we're just retaining slightly more spin off all the latest heads. Whereas actually historically we have seen it go the other way quite a bit, where they're trying to get the face going a bit more. And potentially, this is maybe because some of the materials now, when they first did that, sometimes it's a little bit wet delivery pattern. But none of these are knuckling the spin off, which is good. Actually, one of them, the Strixon, hit it up higher than I expected. So, there's not an awful lot. There's not an awful lot to do. It's a little bit of it's nipping around the edges more than
no, I mean that's good. I mean these have, these have, I've loved them, and they were, and I why do I want to change them because it's 8 years old.
Yeah, I mean the good news is also is that what you haven't been doing is you haven't been developing a funky swing compensation to make them work. They've worked well. You've enjoyed them because they're a good setup. So in that respect, that's actually a really good thing because it's not a case of, oh Christ, I've got to go and groove in, get out of old habits to make something else work, which we often see. If you're using a 120 gram steel, okay, there's going to be a lot of compensating going on. But so dead weight, if I do the dead weight on these two, 419. So actually, this is okay, the grip's a few grams lighter, so it's about 5 or 6 grams lighter because the grip's a little lighter, so it's a bit less weight. So that's possibly where some of the, about a swing weight point and a bit heavier. So, and then that was it because the first version of that, so that shaft's 4 or 5 grams stronger because the first version was exactly the same weight, and then we lost the bottom end on it. So when we went that bit stronger on weight, so there's a few grams more in this, but it's through here rather than almost sort of taking the weight out of this end and leaving the weight in the bottom, and that's where that just tends to leave it that little bit more open. But beyond that, I'll check the lie on this, but beyond that, it's not.
So just a new.
I guess
just a new set of
aprons. The upside is it's not like you have to recalibrate massively on course.
No, I'm really pleased.
It'd be nice if there was a club difference or something like that, but it's.
So is this is the new Apex?
It's the current version of there will be. They are the early September. The Pro and the Blade and the TCB are changing.
Right.
Early part of next year there will be a next generation.
Okay. So where do the paradigms fit in all of this?
So the paradigms are very much more the low spin distance bombers. So the Apex retain a forged frame. They're marrowing in a faster face to get a little bit of speed, tungsten in the bottom. Paradigm do a similar thing, but they're a cast frame, but they will knuckle the spin. They're designed purely for raw yardage. The Apex are kind of, you could argue, they're kind of players. That's sort of forgiving players' head, and that it's not just a low spin, just win a launch.
So I wouldn't want to go to Paradigms, would I?
From a flight point of view, no. I mean, the ball speed will be good off them, but with what they've done refining the Apex model over time is, to an extent with all the distance models, they haven't got quite the low spin flyer shot that if you go back generations and played some of the X-Hot models, you could stand on one shot and it would airmail the green, and the next one would kick up and go pin high. You'd be a 15-yard difference by the end of by the time the balls run out. Where the face flexion and the rigidity of the frame meant that there's a little more distortion on impact, so you've got more variables in flight. Okay. They're all better at that. However, the Paradigm is another degree and a half stronger on loft. It's designed just to get it. It's absolute. It goes a long way, but it's not going to improve the quality of ball flight for where your game's at. If you're hitting it high and loads of spin and we need to just get it going forwards, then it's a good option. It's also going to sound and feel quite a lot harder as well.
That was a bit open.
A little bit, a little bit. Actually, path a little bit left, actually. Right. So let's have a quick look at the face. So that line I put on the ball, a faint one there. You're just working it that way. So I'll do one more to check that. This is just a checking lie. I'll just put a fresh line on that. So there'd be a few more yards where the swings just sort of 5 or 6 out to in. If you were to feel a slight into out, you'd just lose a little bit of that drift left to right, and that would give you potentially another half a club. So it's just getting your path a little less out to win.
That felt good.
Yes, that's squared. So actually, path says the same, but you squared the face up a bit more.
Yeah.
And then
I didn't know I could do that.
So yes, you see line there. It's slightly toe down. So with it pointing to the heel side, so in fact it's just aiming that way a little. Oh no, it's close. It's definitely close, and nice contact point.
Give me.
So we can take that from a lie point of view. So we can take that's pointing just fractioning towards the heel, so we can take the lie a little bit more upright. That'll also just help to bring the toe. So actually relative, this is in line with the current ones. We could bring the toe up just a fraction, which is going to help just to square the face in a touch more. It doesn't kind of make the heel catch and catapult. It's actually more to do with the gearing on the loft.
Yeah.
So.
And I mean, again, these were just purchased. I mean, I didn't know whether these were the right loft or these have never been checked.
Yeah, I mean, very much standard. But actually that works for you. So you're definitely missed average.
Oh, come on.
I don't know what was better, Mr. Standard or Mr. Average, I don't know. But actually, in terms of where the flight is, lie lengthwise, all in the right kind of place. So it's one of those nice ones to say. At least you've not been.
It's the best compliment you ever given. You're Mr. Average.
That's the thing is with the standard settings, they literally kind of pitch it at. What they would perceive for that model, absolute middle ground to give them as much coverage as possible.
I think this is, I said to 100, it's about 150 club. It's quite fun.
Yeah, I mean, so carry distances on carry distances are generally, and there are some players that actually, when you've got a specific target on course, there's a little bit more. I do it with driver. I commit a little bit more on course because there's a definite target rather than a screen and a fairway. But you go from 70.5 to 71.5, you're at 146, 147. And then that's where the very first shot I think you hit was sort of 146 odd, and that was that 71, 103 ball speed. It doesn't take much for it just to lift up a little bit more. But yeah, you carry wise off a fairway, off a tee, or to get up a little bit more, but is in that kind of 145 bracket. So finish distance 150. 155 depending on the green.
That's fine.
So
that's right.
So essentially, it's kind of it's almost, it would be the best part of saying, well, it's a refresh, and then the question then is really is that what you'd value? There is a slight change in the way they're moving, and I think that just gives, say, maybe a little bit more control on like that shot shaping side of it, tempo, not having to work it quite so hard at the top end.
When do I mean, once upon a time, I think when I was going, I thought, when do you start looking at graphite shafted clubs?
So some of that's where, graphite's generally from, I guess you'd start off, they do go up into the hundreds weight-wise, and they go up to 125. You don't use those very often, but it's normally in that 80-85 gram that you tend to switch over. So some of it is that once you go to that weight in steel, because the walls get very, very thin, they have to reinforce the tip end. So the weight shifts down the bottom end.
Okay.
Whereas a composite has got a much, much thicker wall, so they don't have to, so the balance is more at the top end. So for you, once you go down to that 80-85 gram, that's probably when graphite becomes a little bit more relevant, but we're up close to 100 grams on this. So if the whole club was getting behind you and having to fight it, that's when we'd probably start to look at the composites. They're still a reasonable bit off that. Yeah.
Good. Okay. Fantastic.
And certainly you can set makeup going from 5 iron down. There's taking you that shot there from a height point of view. You're up at over 40-degree land angle, 70-75 feet height. The launch and the spin. There's still plenty of launch there for 5 iron to give you that. It'll come in strongish, but it's still a perfectly relevant club. So I think the set makeup you've got there in terms of the main body being 5 through pitch is certainly in a good place.
I was I always struggled with my 4 a bit, and
I think that's where the spin's going to start to dip. So with a 5, you're going to be upper 3000s on spin.
Yeah.
4's going to drop down to more like 3000, which is down where a 3 would spin would be.
Yeah.
Or for example, like my 2 irons at 3, 3, 3, 4. So they just then gets not enough spin to keep the ball in the air. So the carry versus 5 iron's going to, unless you get it perfect, you're probably looking at 4 or 5 yards. And then, other than Link's golf and playing a pass in the wind and fizzing it, it's not an awful. I mean, certainly around something like Hindhead, where you've got bunkers short of the green, the carries to make. Yeah. It's not the kind of chase it in, run it in course. Not a lot of use.
No.
So it makes sense then going into, as you do into the hybrids, so 25-degree 5 iron into the 23-degree hybrid, that's then going to give you that extra lift and carry.
I must admit, this, we always laugh, everyone laughs, this is my go-to play. Yeah. It's so funny. And I don't want to change it, I just hit it so...
Yeah, and hybrids, if they do a job, that's then,
I mean,
they're quite mercurial.
It's just, I love it.
Well, you can see the strike points. I'm gonna just because I think we need to, that wear pattern on the face there is there's a nice, I don't know whether it's visible, there's a nice sort of round centre mark, which everyone wants to see on their club. And that tells a story in terms of, again, that delivery pattern and timing. We're at around the sort of the 65, 70 gram mark on shaft weight.
I know I'm not here to do this, but if I wanted to change this, what would, I mean, what's...
Depends how well you hit it. It's one of those, if it's going well, hybrids in particular, I would always be... And if it's going well and it's doing the job you want that club to do from a flight point of view, I'm always quite nervous about changing a hybrid when you've got something that works well, because they are the most sensitive creatures to weighting and timing.
Okay.
So if you've got one that works really well, it can be very obvious if something is almost as good.
It just
won't work as well.
I mean, you know, I don't know, it goes, I don't know, for me, it's sort of 190. Yeah. It's just lovely, you know, and it sweeps off the...
I'd be, until it stops working. I've done this before where years back we go, oh, in theory, this... But something like a hybrid, they're funny creatures. I think it's why they're either someone's favourite club or least favourite club.
Yeah.
Grab the edge of that. Because they're right or wrong.
Yes.
There's not a lot of okay about them.
Yeah.
And I mean, actually, that one from a setup point of view, weighting and things ties in pretty well. So there's nothing. Yeah. It's not like it's working arse about face. It makes sense that it would be in the right kind of area. Yeah. And then the backup of confidence that you've got with it as well. That's not something you can buy.
No.
Yeah,
okay.
if it's working,
yeah.
If it ain't broke, definitely don't fix it on a hybrid. So what we'll do, I'll move the launch model forward and we'll have a look at the wedge side of it. So I think we're likely to see a little bit more difference on the wedge setup.
Okay.
Certainly from a shaft weight point of view. So get this line up. Slide that target area over a little.
This will be actually quite interesting, actually.
So what we'll do initially is look at start with your 56 and just look at some fairly kind of standard pitching swings. So not necessarily a full shot, but just as a comfortable pitching swing. James, is it better if I put a bit of light on in the bay? Yeah. Oh, I go off the front one with these. Just, otherwise you might leave without teeth. So just a comfortable pitching. So if that were kind of, I guess, a sort of a 70, 75 yard shot, something like that. Yeah. So not a full swing, but just a comfortable knockdown. Okay. 75. Okay, let's see one more of those. Yeah, so it's pretty square in terms of hit, but there's definitely a little bit of a chase through afterwards. So, but that makes sense. If we're looking at kind of around the 100 gram mark on iron shafts, you're then putting 30% more weight in for the wedges. Which the good side with the dynamic golds, they're not tip heavy. There's a very even weight through. It's just that there's just a lot of weight there. So if you were to try and put a bit more into it, you more so in winter time, I think you're going to find yourself a little more sensitive when the ground softens up.
I do.
To just getting a little bit diggy and a little deep.
And I do, and it's fat it.
And that's that bit where it gets a little later, and then the catch up gets a little steeper and into the ground. So if we can take a bit of weight out, it can keep turning with you, and it creates a sort of shallower base to the swing rather than the V-shaped one. So I'll put something together that's going to rein that weight back a little. Keep it with the same base head. Take about 15 grams out of the shaft.
Wow. That sounds significant.
Yeah, it's 10%. So yeah, reasonable bit. But so this will still. I'm going to get just from a setup point of view, I'm just going to get something that's a little less head heavy. Just where we've got to glue the adapters onto these, they come out slightly stronger. So just so I can control the weighting a bit to start with, and we can go back onto that.
Love another tea. Yes, please. Thank you so much. Do you want my mug? Thank you.
Okay, that's better. I'll just make sure it's not a funky loft.
And I suppose the other thing is have I got the right gaps?
Yep.
Because, well, you tell me.
Yeah, I mean they're pretty evenly gapped. So the pitch wedge is at 46 degrees, then you're at, give or take half a degree, 46, 50, 56, 60. So there's give or take a degree here or there.
Yeah.
They're not going to be yawning gaps in the setup. So I mean some of that is, sorry, failing to multitask, is kind of are there distances you'd like them to be, but if you like having the extra loft that you've got with the 60, then you're...
Is this 56?
Yeah.
Feels more.
Feels like more, okay, yeah.
I don't know.
Okay, yeah. So a bit like the iron side of things, it's just not got, it means that you and the club are coming through in one go. So it takes out that little bit of a late and a catch up. So, and particularly things like bunker shots, it means being able to kind of cut the legs out from under it, keep turning through fast, but keep the loft on rather than it wanting to turn it down.
Doesn't sound quite as nice.
A little bit of matte on that.
No, didn't like that one.
Just one more of that.
If you go any thinner though, you're going to make it really hard for yourself.
Okay, I'm going to take weight up just a fraction more. Definitely don't want to go lighter than that. Let's see if we move it up a few grams. But then effectively keeps the feel to swing irons into wedges just a little bit more consistent.
That's amazing because it feels like, just the look of it, it felt like a...
Okay, yeah, it can sometimes be just different contrast in the colour, slightly different lines around the top line. Yeah.
I trust you, Simon. I trust you. You're the expert.
You've got a busy weekend coming up?
Bit of, well...
Or does it depend on...
Yes.
I think Saturday's meant to be pretty miserable.
Is it?
I believe.
We've got to roll up on Saturday. And then bizarrely, I'm off to play Rye on tomorrow.
Okay, yeah.
So we've got a little Hindhead versus Rye match. So I'm going to, once I've been here, I've got to go to pop into London and then for a meeting and then jump in my car and
Rye's, I like Rye, I like to get it, but I always like to find it funny. I think Rye's almost a lunch club with a golf course. It's, they do a very good lunch.
They do.
They know how to lunch very well.
They do. They do. So we're
But it's nice going somewhere that you know you're going to get around the golf course in good speed.
Yes. We just hope the weather's going to be...
Interesting. It's just...
That felt nice.
Did that feel better or a little heavier?
It felt... Yeah, it just felt nicer.
Yep. Yeah, it's interesting. So for those, when we're going to the partial shots, there's one, the light one got a little left. I don't mind it having a bit of an open face in these because one, that retains some spin, but it means it's not coming out hot.
Yeah.
But I mean, that one's only curving, 5 or 6 feet. So whilst if it didn't have the shadow, it wouldn't look like it was shaping very much. So I'd rather see it that way for these partial ones than...
That was a bit diggy.
Than getting a little bit left on you. But again, face to path and path are a little bit more consistent, going a little heavier. Okay, I'm going to
feels nice.
just very slightly change the balance point, and then I'll come back to it. It's just essentially reducing the old school, the heft of the club.
Yes.
And that just makes a little bit more. You're dictating where the club goes and having to firefight the weight a little bit. Because again, kind of balance point, swing weight, static balance isn't that different from your 50, 60. The 60 gets a little bit heavier, but it's just taking that shaft weight down a little bit.
Okay.
This one's just putting the weight back down the bottom a bit more. This is dotting I's and crossing T's. Due diligence. Again, sometimes into the wedge shots, a little bit more in the bottom end can be a good thing. So. I think. Yeah, it's interesting. That's back left again. So where it gets a little more behind, the shorter irons, you're more likely to square the toe over and drag it. So what I will do one, and I'll tell you what I prefer with the other one. Yeah, that way you can definitely see it get a little bit more.
It's amazing.
Kind of lagged, and then the hands having to do a little bit more.
Yeah.
What I preferred about the other one is it allowed you to keep going that way and keep the face square.
Yeah.
So I'll put that back in. So what I'll do is I'll pop that back on. I'll pop it onto the Vokey head actually, just to compare. So same family of shafts as the irons, just a heavier version. So a 118, 120 gram version. So a little bit more of a jump up in weight than average, but some of that's possibly just the feel shots you're used to having quite a lot more weight there. So again, having that weight there, it gives you something to use, gives you a little bit more familiarity, which for the feel shots, that's probably the one bit where having developed that, some of the technique and the shots with that weight, drop too light and then you lose the bit to respond to. Whereas the fuller swings is a bit more functional in that respect.
It's funny, I've always never really got on. I'm okay now, but me and the 50 didn't get. And it's funny you said that straight away.
And that's the one where you're the 50 primarily. The other two you can make work because there's less acceleration. Whilst it's not necessarily, even the 50 might not be like a 6-iron swing. There's still a little bit. It's a bigger move. It's still kind of one might call a distance wedge shot. And having to bridge up to the pitch wedge rather than just playing the dinky ones, where the weight then is less of an issue.
And so I've sort of not avoid using it, but you know what.
Well, it's in the back of your mind. There are shots that you don't want in the back of your mind, and it draws on experience of, going right. Like I know that one doesn't quite work as well, so. Yeah, it's better connected going back to that.
Felt nice.
Out of interest, how does the loft look on this one?
Oh dear.
That one again. Put it into context. I know it's gone right. That's 6 foot right. It just looks a long way on the screen.
6 foot?
6 foot right, yeah. This is very slightly heavier in the head than we'll go to. Very slightly, so it's just taking it a little bit right. That's with these with the wedges because of the adapter that goes on the end. With the irons we grind a bit off, but with the wedges to keep the length we keep it on. So not a problem from a balance point of view and build.
That was better.
That was a really crisp contract.
That was nice.
Yeah. So really crisp contact, good amount of spin.
Yeah.
Nice control there. Yeah.
That felt better.
Does that look less loft than the Mizuno? I'll give you the.
Yes.
Yeah, it must just be potentially there's a slightly thicker top line on that. This might be the slightly different shape, but they're identical. But yeah. So what I want to look at next, definitely like where that shaft is. I want to look at the the bounce side of it. So I'm just going to get the board so I can look at the strike point on the
Okay.
bottom.
That's more just because you get more shots today than you put problem with that's the thing, it's just more expensive hands. I want a really soft one, you know. If you want soft, then I would definitely recommend that.
Yeah, I think what you're likely to see is it taking that sort of 10-12 grams out the shaft. It's just going to open up a few more shots. So almost rather than being, if you're wanting to kind of change the angle of attack, kind of pick it off a bit more, get a bit steep, particularly bunkers.
Yes.
Being able to change your angle of attack.
Yeah.
And just by pitch of swing and turn through it rather than being forced into it, kind of getting a bit behind and
I don't mind
closing
bunkers. I would say I'm not a bad bunker player. I can normally get it in.
Well, I think the ones of being able to pop one up, change the spin, change the flight a little bit.
Yeah.
I think that's where it's going to allow you to turn through and accelerate, shallow out and clip it a bit more.
Okay.
Rather than always having to play a bit of an explosion shot.
Yeah.
That kind of thing.
Yeah. No. Okay. Get that
and
one.
then for some of the pitch shots, I say dependent on the turf type. I think certainly in winter, be able to control your divot depth a little bit more.
No, that would be
because the low point's going to be a bit more
definitely.
consistent.
I do.
I've always struggled. Wet fairway on an upstrike with a lob wedge has never been a friend of mine. So just that fairly standard one first. Good stuff. Most people thin the first one. I'll have a little look on the sole of that.
Is that me trying to avoid?
So that's back half, but fairly central. I'll do one more because the first one's normally a slight reaction to having a bit of plastic under the ball.
Okay.
But again, I wouldn't expect you to be too front edge because you're not driving heavily down onto it. You're going to catch more at the bottom of the arc, so catch a little later on the sole anyway. So. Yeah, that's a very similar sound on the strike. Exactly the same spot. So we certainly don't want to go more bounce than that. I mean, that sort of bounce is absolutely fine in kind of mid to softer conditions because where it's a little further back, I'll just show this to the camera afterwards, that shows you're coming in there a bit more rather than that way. So we'd want to give you a little bit of a, especially in the UK where we get rock hard in summer, then soft bunkers and then rock hard bunkers and soft turf. We need a bit of balance so that if on soft turf or something like this, you can open it up, or soft sand, you can open it up and give yourself loads of bounce. Yeah. But then with the higher loft wedge, maybe something that sits a bit tighter, so you've got the opposite effect. So I'll put something a little tighter together. So that's the strike point on the sole there. So a little more towards the back half. I'll get a, because that's actually the one thing at the moment you have is no differentiation between those two. They are identical in terms of sole shape, your 56 and 60, and identical strike point as well. But you don't have, they're both S grinds, they're both a 10 degree bounce, the sole shaping is the same. Yeah. So you don't have the option off a firm tight bunker to kind of have something that's going to get into it a little bit more. You've got plenty of bounce for when it's a bit softer sand. Yeah. And the turf side of it is going to be more affected by that weight getting there and then that way. So that's where I'd look to create on the 60 something that's a little bit shallower. Yes. So when we're looking at the Vokeys, more of an M grind, I'll get that ahead. Just that allows you to sit a little open, nip it off a little bit more. The reason I've got these two, so you've got M grind and the Vokey, and then there's I'm using the Mizuno purely because of the width. It's the same width, but it's slightly shallower, taking that peak off. Yes. Which, that's great in the US where it's the turf that kind of explodes on contact. Yeah. For you, I think, and we often take that off here, it gives plenty of width to give plenty of protection against softer conditions. But getting rid of that means it just sits a little bit neater for tighter turf. And I think we'll use more of the sole rather than just on that ridge. Okay. So I'll just display the shallower profile versus the peak on the Vokey. So I'll pop that on and just see the same thing, look at that strike point. Because what I want to do on this one is just bring that a little bit further forward. Yeah. So it's not just the back edge getting in the way. But if you were to, the Vokey's still a very good wedge. And quite a lot of the time with the M grind or the D grind or something where it's got that peak on the higher slough, we end up just smoothing it off because our turf's just tighter here.
Yeah. That would make sense to why I do some of the things I do, you know?
Yeah, okay, yeah. Yeah, so certainly if you've got a bunker with not a lot of sand in, it's likely to have a bit of a kind of catapultic close kind of effect rather than being able to keep the loft on and nip underneath.
Yeah.
So we'll see where that does from a strike point of view. So just initially just that fairly standard, so it's probably only like a 50 odd yard shot, I guess, fairly standard pitch shot, and then we'll see one that's a bit more like a bunker shot as well. Okay.
Sorry.
Yeah, so even that's
I think
fairly central, but if we have more of a peak, that's going to go into a much harder, narrow line. So just see if you had I guess the equivalent of a bunker shot. Actually, interested to see what you do with that. It's a bit weird off this surface.
I'll do a bunker shot.
Yeah.
So it's a bit of a
swing. Okay, yeah, so weight goes a little bit forward, but you still rotate through. That's something that the lighter shaft weight will help with. So it's dropped it a bit more into the heel, but slightly further back. So what that shows, if we've got a higher peak here, that's then landing on the peak and kicking.
Yeah.
So, you know, from a front to back, it's sort of back middle, but there's a bit of width to that mark.
Okay.
So if I were to, just to display it, I'm going to put that M grind on and show you what would happen with that, just to show why that shallower sole's a little bit better. It's just like anything, you say it's going to work and then probably something strange will happen. But because the peak sits a bit more proud, it just gets in the way a little bit more. So we should see kind of this narrower line at the
Am I a little
back
bit flat anyway? Do I need to probably be coming in a bit steeper? Is that probably why I'm not?
Not necessarily, no. I mean, you look at some of the best wedge players. They're not steep onto it. Actually, someone like Spieth is quite shallow into it. You know, Zach Johnson, Tiger doesn't take much divot. And Mickelson's got a bit more lag and is a bit steeper onto it. But generally speaking, the best wedge players aren't that steep, which then means you're not reliant on pinching the ball against the turf quite as much. So, and you're not de-lofting too much, so the loft stays a bit more constant. So yeah, I wouldn't worry about depth. I think your depth consistency will improve with a lighter weight. I think that's more it, rather than the club getting a little late and then coming in more of a V shape. This, as you rotate through, you can create a longer area at the bottom where it's at a more consistent depth. So,
wow.
Yeah, interesting. So it's a little bit. It's not so much of a peak as I expected. Not quite so much. But it still peaks up behind where that contact point is. So the moment, if you go bunker shot wise, that might be the one it shows itself a little bit more. Let me move that ball out of the way. Okay, I think that should. Yeah, so sound changed a little bit, so that's then that narrower, you can see the hard line right on the ridge. So that's where actually the middle of this bit's okay, but the moment you open it up, that back edge catches it a little bit more, so the width of the mark's more consistent.
It's in the middle.
With the shallow, yeah, that's all good, so on the Vokey, which is this one, the one more on the heel is a narrower mark, which shows a slightly kind of harder where the peak's taken the contact. So that's the bit that the moment you open it up, the leading edge sits up a bit more, and then it catches, and that's the one that can either catapult the face over or literally bounce it into the back. So, from a general kind of until it gets to that back point, let me take that off for you, you can see. Those two are broadly speaking the same. But instead of carrying on and peaking, just shallowing that out, also blending that back edge into the centre, just stops that bit getting in the way for the real finish shots around the greens. and compare that to that one, where that sits even steeper.
Yes.
So that gets even more in the way.
Yes.
So it kind of that then exacerbates that issue.
Yeah.
So the M grind's better than the S.
Yeah.
But the M grind with a blending into that ridge for those delicate ones just makes it a little bit better again.
Yeah. No, I'm definitely.
So the only other bit I'm going to do, I'm going to put the 50 degree on this shaft, just see how that swings at this weight. Just fine tune that. But I mean, certainly, say from a performance point of view, the base shoulder shape on the S grind on a 56, the M with that little bit of a grinding on the sole, that sets up really well. And it's hard to argue again. The Vicky Wedge has always been very good. Their designs are good.
Yeah.
You're used to the shaping of them, the feel off the heads.
Yeah.
Again, that kind of continuity element.
As I say, I've always liked them. They've always been. They've been loyal servants.
And the other bit is the way that how they cut their grooves and the face side of things. That chipping wise, that again just gives a little bit more continuity. So you'd essentially be finding a reason to change. Almost a bit like the irons. If they work and the heads still continue to work well, then the update, but this time with a different shaft weight, that's the bit that's going to make the difference, and a bit of a grind on the 60.
Yeah.
That then gives you something which is going to create a noticeable difference, rather than making more of a change. Just if you hadn't enjoyed using them, then that's a different matter. But
no, I've. But again, I just, it was. I sort of knew what I wanted, and they've worked really well.
Just put that just that fraction more on here. Just fine tune that balance. I'll make sure it's at 50 as well. And this should transition from a full swing point of view a little bit more easily. Yeah. Okay. This is then going back more to a kind of stock swing. Don't need that mat. I'll move that out of the way.
That's right. Quick.
So let's get rid of that. But this should feel a bit more comfortable playing a more standard, fuller swing.
Oh, that feels good.
So
right.
It's marginally right, but you're looking at about 6 to 8 feet. But probably just made sure it didn't go right on that one. But face hasn't closed. So path got a bit more out to in, but the face has stayed half a degree open. So it's not. Oh, is it got a? Do I need to give it a little bit of a? Oh, there's a little click.
As I went back on the last one, I went.
Let me just flip that around. Marginal tolerances on the teeth. Let me just flip that over. And
As I went back on the last one, it just did a little wobble. Yeah?
Yep.
Cool.
Yeah, again, there's certainly no fight to get the club through the ball. So, it's still got that little bit of a drop to right rather than a turn over left. But it's going to make it easier to play the fuller swings with it rather than almost be forced to rein it back a little bit.
Yeah, it feels nice on me.
So it's just bringing, the iron shafts are going a couple of grams stronger. Then we're taking 10 grams out of that. You're bringing them basically kind of 14, 15 grams closer to one another in total. So that differential currently between your 50 and your pitch wedge, which is quite a yawning gap.
It is. Can I hit my 50?
Of course. Yeah.
Just see. this will be an interesting. It's very different.
Yeah.
It feels very different.
Yeah, interesting. It's then path's got a little bit more out to in. You struck it solidly, but it's, yeah, that extra weight will be quite noticeable.
It is.
Yeah.
It's it feels like I've got somebody else's club.
Yeah, and that's the one that it doesn't quite come with you and then dumps into the ground.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I was sort of joking to say that sort of weight club's quite an appropriate word. There's barely a shaft heavier than that.
No.
So you're bringing that 10 grams out of that. That just narrows the gap,
Yeah.
the differential between pitch and 50, and then the 50 feels, you say, more like a natural extension. That bit of extra weight still helps with the 3/4 shots.
Yes.
But it's.
But it does.
It's less of a
it's
jump.
always when I come out of that run, I go, I'm going to this. It just feels right now. You've got your different clubs.
yeah. And whilst they are, marginally, it shouldn't feel like it's a different sport altogether.
No, exactly.
So, in terms of, and that would again be the grind, F grind 8 degrees. That doesn't need to change. They've very, very slightly. Well, marginally, they very slightly refine that front edge line to make it a bit more versatile, but essentially 50-56 from a head point of view, and you might kind of look and go, okay, well, you might even go 50, 55, 60 or one of those. But I think, certainly where you play in heather and things around greens, having the loft and something you can cut the legs out from under and pop up, the loft certainly makes sense. I wouldn't be looking to change the basis of where they are. It might be a degree here or there just to make distance gaps even. But you're looking at a few yards here or there.
Yeah, no, they feel right. 50, and what's the pitching wedge? 46.
Again, currently 46. It's the kind of thing where from a gapping it could be 45, could be 46. The first one could be 49, could be 50. Just to make those distances work. So it's the kind of thing where either on pickup or once you've used them a little bit, you can sort of put them in line with these, and then if once you use them a little bit, we can cross-reference and make some fine tunes if need be. But it's likely to be a degree here or there, just to kind of even up some gaps. It might be with that change in shaft on the 50 that actually starts to come out a little bit stronger. So there's always a chance that a few games in it might just need a little bit of a tweaking just to sort of say actually I'd like this club to hit that yardage for me. There's a like St George's Hill, there's a par 3, it's 120. And it's quite nice to have just a standard swing for that.
Yes.
So you get the tour guys that I think Vijay Singh one tournament, he had his 6 iron strengthened 2 degrees because he didn't want to hit a half 5 iron on a par 3. Now that's the extreme version of it. But if you're playing a lot of your golf at hindhead and you go actually let's just say a 95-yard shot versus a 90-yard shot is preferable, then you can make them work for that.
Just notice this is. It's amazing, isn't it?
Yeah, actually, with those,
I didn't.
we'd look,
the spins is.
Yeah, we'd be looking to get.
I mean, I'm just saying the difference from, a difference from the. I didn't realise the spin rates would be so different from the 6 iron.
Yeah, and actually, for these ones, almost the higher the better. So where some of these, I think we get a 9 into it. Again, you're relatively quiet on spin, so where your angle of attack's a bit shallower, it's higher launch and a bit less spin because there's a bit less kind of pull and grip. You get players like I'm at 10,500 which with false fronts on greens can be suboptimal. When it's firm, it's great. You get a bounce and a stop. My nightmare time of year is sort of spring, autumn, where there's still a bit of pace to the green. But then the top layer softens up a bit, and then you get the initial pull, and it's gone. So it goes, that's great.
Oh, you got
too many false fronts. So then I ended up playing a lot of half wedge shots. But actually, again, dynamically, like that shot, for example, you're still landing at 50 degrees. It's almost with UK greens, other than maybe the kind of the real kind of hard summer to be a little quieter on spin, especially someone like Hindhead where there are lots of slopes and things. So it's just landing with a little less rip, but it's landing steep enough to drop and stop. So
drop and stop is good.
Kind of a lot of lot of good in that as well. In terms of with the wedges, they still do what they're called now. I can't remember what they would call them back here. They do like a brushed steel finish, which has, like that one, I'll get it for you, it's a slightly darker chrome.
Okay.
So they do the standard chrome. They do a raw that rusts up, which ironically, without having chrome on it, is dearer. But not everyone likes the rusty. They do the black, but that will fade a little bit more.
Yeah, I'm not. I'm not a big.
But they've got that's the equivalent of what you have. It's that slightly.
Yes.
I'll get the light right. Okay. Slightly darker chrome that lightens up a little bit over time. Yeah. Versus. That standard chrome, slightly lighter finish, but it's a sort of satin one. It's not that kind of mirrored finish like the back of them is, it's like they used to be. Yeah. Purely visual.
I must admit, a couple of times when sunlight, from a, I don't know. There's been times where I've sort of.
Yeah, I
mean, would that not make much difference? It's just the sun. If that would that be any difference?
I was looking at these finishes. Not particularly different these. I think if you get unlucky and get the perfect angle, because that's still quite a sort of a satin finish. Yeah. So you've got to get it. If I get one of those lights just to remind myself what. Yeah, you've got to get unlucky to get the sun right at the right angle. So even the satin, the tau chrome, satin chrome, that's going to be similar. The only way you would get rid of it would be something like that black oxide finish or a raw where it's got no chroming on. Outside of that little bit of a difference in colour just frames the ball slightly differently. But that's not going to be less. You're not going to get less glare on that than that one. They are, to all intents and purposes, the same finish.
No, satin finishes.
Retain the slightly darker one. Yeah. And then all you'd get on the 60s, where we do that little bit of a grind on. There'd be a slight mark where we do the grind because it takes the top layer off. Yeah. So it'd be a slightly lighter mark just on that, but obviously you won't see it from a dress, but functionally it'll.
It's.
So then the final bit's the grips. So let's see your hand size to mine. Okay, so slightly broader than mine, actually quite deep there, which actually in your bottom hand makes a difference. So that length between the base of your thumb and that first sort of knuckle there, you can see how much shorter. Yours is about, probably third more, 50% more than mine. So that then is how your bottom hand, kind of how much of that index finger wraps around the bottom. Yeah. So on that one, I'll have a look at the top hand there as well. So top hand size is good. Tips of the fingers just touching. Yeah. In your bottom hand, it's whether you feel you've got to kind of close that finger down. So on your wedges, you've got the +4, which takes the tapering out. Yeah. Which, in theory, should mean not having to hold it quite so tight in the bottom hand and keep the hand a bit softer.
Okay. Yeah.
Whereas the taper down, you've got to close it down a little bit. Yeah. So in principle, the less tapered grip fits your bottom hand slightly better.
Okay.
It's not horrendous on these, so it's the kind of one where there's a bit of comfort with it as well. But if it feels like your hands settle onto that grip without having to physically kind of pinch that finger and thumb together, then it keeps that right hand a little bit more relaxed through the swing. It kind of takes out a bit of regrip.
Yeah, possibly.
But it may not be, if it's not something that's that noticeable.
It's not.
Then
it's not. I
think a little bit. So whichever grip we go with, we can reduce that tapering down a little bit, which I think I would look to do is to go even if it's sort of halfway between. Yeah. I think just making sure it doesn't taper too quickly means not. Yeah. If it gets too small, that thumb's got to put pressure on, and then that locks out that hand. So you lose a bit of fluidity through. Okay. In terms of grip type, obviously you've got the multi-compounds on everything through. Are they on these as well? Yeah. Not on that one. Okay, so not on, but on that one. Okay. So one of the differences that the wedges and the driver have got that rib down the back.
Oh, right, yeah.
And it's whether that, it's a sort of feel reference point, it's whether that feels like it sits into the fingers a little bit better. Or whether
possibly
around, or whether it's noticeable enough to make a tangible difference. So I've got used to it over the years. I've played a rib for 30 years, so my hands are used to feeling that reference point in my hands.
Okay. I don't think so. I mean, I probably because I've not played. I've never played with a rib, so
yeah.
I mean, it's.
And this was the stock grip that came with it.
Yes, that would have been definitely.
So it's not something you kind of feel that helps me put my hands on the clay. It's there, but it's not something you consciously use.
Or am I just missing an opportunity to?
I think if it was something that was noticeably better, it would just feel more stable in your hands. Well, it would be, oh yeah, actually that feels quite nice.
Okay.
Whereas if it's just,
yeah,
it's there, but is it really doing anything? So your wedges have got them on, but the irons don't.
See, I didn't even notice that.
So it's probably not doing much.
So that just shows you.
So that probably tells you that there's not enough of a difference for you to go, oh yeah, I really know that. I didn't
even notice that.
Okay.
What does that tell you?
Says don't need them. And then grip tight, the multi-compounds give you that bit of tread in the top hand, softer bottom hand. They're a really good grip for that. With you having them on the majority of the clubs, it wouldn't be something I'd be trying to take you away from.
No.
You certainly get quite a bit of purchase on that top hand. So
I do have quite warm hands.
Okay.
They're quite, I mean, they're already, I mean, it's warm in here, they're quite sweaty.
Yep. So certainly in that top hand, having that bit of cording gives that, and the gloved hand gives a little bit more purchase. And the upside of these ones, you've still got a bit of tread pattern without the hardness of a cord. I'll get something that's got a cord all the way through just to give you that contrast.
Thanks, Simon.
But it's whether it feels in your bottom hands, whether that feels a little hard or whether you feel that you get a lot of grip.
Yeah.
So it's the summertime, I guess the bit I would say that summertime probably feel great.
Yeah.
In wintertime when it gets colder, they will firm up a little bit.
Okay.
The rubber gets a little bit firmer. So if you get some of those really kind of rough builder's hands, then these are great because there's loads of grip.
Yeah. No.
But in my delicate little hands, the cord rips my hands up.
No, I'm office keyboard type person.
If you haven't had any issues with those, then I would be inclined to stay with them.
Okay.
Again, it's partly that familiarity thing, partly yes, your only point of contact with the club, and if they've been good and you haven't felt you've lost control of them, or felt like you've had good comfort.
I think these are okay.
Then I think stay with that grip type.
I think
because
these
again they make sure that bottom hand's not going to feel harsh.
Yeah.
And that again automatically kind of locks things up and tenses up. But obviously,
I can't remember when I had those done.
They look like they've been on a while, but they look like they lasted pretty well. I'll get a completely fresh one just to show you the difference there.
I make myself re-grip my clubs more often than I used to.
Okay, yeah.
I played with some of my friends, and I'm surprised.
Yeah, so completely fresh one will have a little bit more. There's a bit more tread and edge to it, so a bit more grip. So
yeah. How often do you re-grip yours?
Well, I don't play very often. So actually, the grips that I currently use don't really degrade very much, so I haven't had to change them that often. They're a slightly different material. But I'm not a heavy wearer on grips because I don't beat practice balls enough. I think most of the time, if you're playing 2-3 times a week, then annually still quite a bit. Yeah. But I'd certainly go every other year.
Yeah, I think I'm.
Yeah. And if there are particular clubs that like the way to know, so your pitch wedge started to squeak. So that means that top layer's sliding.
Okay.
So that's then losing a bit of pitch. That's a pretty good marker.
Okay.
But once you start to lose that tread, and what you don't do, some players get a heavy wear mark on one point.
Yeah.
That's just started to shine up a little bit. That's an absolute side that's a good time to change.
Bearing in mind that that is probably a highly used. That is.
Yeah. So they'll just get polished a little bit more with usage.
Yeah.
So, in terms of the only other element with the grip is colour. So there are still black and red, black and blue. I'll put them up on screen actually so you can see. Purely visual, there's absolutely no difference in the grips whatsoever with these, but sartorially.
Yes.
So they do them. I'll go into detail on it. So they do a black,
yeah,
black white like you've got on the driver,
yeah.
and they do a black and yellow.
Okay, or a black and blue.
Or a black and blue, which is that one.
That's that one.
Yeah.
Okay.
Normally has some kind of sporting allegiance, or the kind of go the least offensive possible.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Blue. Let's go blue.
Yep. Got it. Okay. Great. Did you? I mean, do you want a contrast on the wedges, or keep it the same all the way through?
I think keep it the same all the way through.
We have had people when they did more colours a few years ago before COVID and production levels dropped. They had like 7 or 8 colours. We had people who go through basically the whole rainbow through a set, which looked great when they were laid out together.
Yeah.
Not sure I'd do it myself. But
no, I don't. I mean, I'm not quite. I presume you must have got them done at a different time. So why would have somebody put these on for me then?
There was a period where it was there weren't many around, so it might have been just the closest they could get.
Okay.
Go back a couple of years and grips were, rubber generally supply was pretty tight, so Golf Pride stripped 40 grips out from theirs, so all the colours and some of the types. So it may well have been that's like this is the closest we've got. There's every chance that it was that because they were scarce.
Yeah.
Yeah. Great.
Wow.
So fine tunes on the irons. A little bit of more even balance and a couple more grams dead weight.
Yeah.
But effectively kind of a refresh, but takes a little bit of the fetch out of it at the bottom.
Yeah.
And then the wedges, obviously freshen the faces up, a little bit of a tighter grind on the 60.
Yeah.
But losing 10 grams out the shaft to bring them closer to the irons and make them less of a contrast. But that should give you a little more consistency on timing and strike and divot depth and a bit more control. There we go.
You've been a star.
Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you very much.
Great fun.
It's been brilliant. Really has. It's been great fun.